Hi, so my name is Tizarah Turner and I am the community pastor at Crosspoint Church in Cary, North Carolina, and was a part of some of those beginning conversations when we started talking about building the community garden at the Crosspoint YMCA property campus. The garden idea really started with a few people who kind of had a dream. Michelle Johnson, who worked for the Y Project at the time, Thomas Maldonado, who had a connection to both the Y and Crosspoint, Molly McCabe, and Tanya Randall, who were there. They pulled a bunch of people together just to talk about what we might do with the extra land that was behind campus. It was an initial first couple of meetings. We had, like I said, all those people I mentioned, plus myself. Mia South from the Togetherhood Committee on the Northwest Cary YMCA joined in, and really we did a bunch of brainstorming sessions. What would a garden look like? Why would we have a garden? And after several meetings, we decided on the name, the Growing Together Community Garden, and we decided on a mission that it was going to be a collaboration between the Northwest Cary YMCA and Crosspoint Church. The goal was to educate, collaborate, and build community around the practice of gardening. So everything that we did after that focused on those ideas. We had to decide a few things. Where was the garden going to be? How big was it going to be? We needed permitting for that. We needed to know how the land was going to be. If we were going to do above ground beds, below ground beds, what kind of pests we might have. If we were going to do organic gardening, what we would plant, where we would get volunteers, where we would get funding, what was going to happen with all the produce. We consulted quite a few people. We had master gardeners come in from all over the place. We had Chris and Clett, Kate Scrub, Brooke Williams, who came in as master gardeners from various places, AmeriCorps, connections to the YMCA, connections to Crosspoint, and kind of give us advice about how you would go about doing that. And they kind of were consultants for a little while. And then eventually we had our lead gardeners, Jenny Sini and Christine Tudor, who took over the planning of the garden and what would go into the beds. We held some informational meetings and places to sign up, and we said, okay, if you're interested in being a part of this, sign up here. And we asked questions like, do you have a gardening experience? You know, everything from I've never gardened in my life all the way up to I own a farm. And then what we decided was going to be important and kind of the goals outside of that educate, collaborate, and community was we really wanted to help educate people on not only the mental and physical health benefits of gardening, but also community building benefits. We visited a lot of local community gardens, and we also wanted to help alleviate some of the hunger issues and the lack of fresh produce within food pantries. So we began a small partnership with the White Oak Foundation, who has a food pantry just a couple miles down the road from the Growing Together Community Garden, and determined that at least most of what we harvested outside of educational purposes would go to the White Oak Foundation for their weekly food pantries. And so that is still where most of our produce goes. Every week we have volunteers that harvest, and especially Jenny and Christine are there all the time and have kept the garden going through ups and downs, through COVID, through times when we weren't allowed to volunteer. They've really kept the garden thriving. We also use the garden. There's, especially during the summer, we have the camps that come through the YMCA. Kinder Camp comes and waters our garden for us. They have little watering cans, and they take turns watering and being educated about things that happen in the garden. We partner with the Young Men's Service League and various other local organizations that come in, volunteer, and help in the garden. They do everything from building to planting to harvesting to weeding to shoveling really heavy mulch to installing sheds. So our garden is almost 100% volunteer driven. Nobody is getting paid to run the garden, and we just have some incredible volunteers. The most difficult things about the garden, getting the garden, was getting permitting, was making decisions on what kind of beds we were going to have. It was getting the tools in place to dig the holes, to put the fences in, organizing our garden work days, and there was always a ton of people that were willing to come and help. Countless hours of cutting and staining and nailing and putting up the fencing to keep deer out. So those are probably the trickiest things as far as the garden goes. And then also things like, where do we get water from? And we just started by having volunteers really myself and Tanya and Molly, who worked at the Y at the time, we would come out on our breaks and water the garden every single day, and we would just have to attach the hose to the pool bathroom and drag it out and water the garden and then drag it back in. And then eventually we were able to hook up a hose on the side that was semi-permanent, and that was a little bit tricky because people kept on unhooking it for various reasons. Put some signage up there, and then we got an irrigation system, which helped quite a bit. Although we still need people to come and water areas that don't get as much water. In that first year, we're recipients of several awards. So we got a couple of grants. We got a Town of Cary gardening grant that helped pay for a lot of the initial lumber and planting. We reached out for seeds and growing kits to local and not local organizations that sent us things to get us started. We had local gardeners, like backyard gardeners, that came and brought some of their plant clippings. Jenny and Christine grew plants in their windowsills at home and brought them in. We also were recipients of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints grant, and we also received the Wake County Bridge Builder Award in this first year or so that we were doing the gardening. As far as things that we are looking forward to for the garden, we are always interested in expanding the garden. COVID kind of put a little bit of a halt to that because of the amount of volunteers and time that we were able to be at the building. But we are really having a resurgence in interest in the garden and time that we're able to be there, and the availability of volunteers now that we can get back. So our goal really is to continue to educate. We have several opportunities to do that within events at the garden and through work days, through other partnerships within the community. We also are continuing to give our produce to White Oak Foundation for their food pantry. And we also are really trying to work on getting our Plant a Row for the Hungry program going so that individuals within the community can plant at home and add what they produce at home to what we have, the Growing Together Community Garden, to be taken to White Oak so that things don't just have to happen at the garden. We're also looking at events at the garden, so community events, mindfulness events, educational events, and really to expand it. We've talked a lot about edible landscaping. We've talked a lot about expanding out into further parts of the campus, and all of that, of course, is contingent upon the volunteer time that we have and what the world looks like in the future. We have a great love for the garden. It is continuing to grow, continuing to captivate people, and it's very often that we have people just stop by and check out what's going on there, ask questions about it, and want to get involved. And we also have incredible lead gardeners that the garden, quite honestly, would not have continued without them, and without their vision and without their commitment to keeping it going in its baby stage days, which hit right during COVID. And their innovation with making sure that it's accessible, making sure that it is educational, making sure that it's community building, all of the things that we value, those gardeners have done an incredible job with. We hope to continue expanding and using our garden to create just a really beautiful community in our area. And we know that gardening is not only about just the product, although that's incredibly helpful and does meet a need for hunger, but it also, gardening and being out in nature and being a part of growing something, being a part of participating in something that you're going to eat or experience with your senses, because that's what gardens are. They engage all of your senses, does something beneficial to your mind and body and soul. And gardening connects people in a way that so many other things don't. And that's really, really the goal of the Growing Together Community Garden.